Welcome back to another episode of the DailyFlip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be talking about banks and how they are afraid of losing some of their influence, especially under the current MAGA, Make America Great Again, / Donald Trump presidency. So we'll get basically right down to it. The daily debate for today. Are banks going to still have a place in a decentralized economy? Now, I'm not saying we're actually headed towards a decentralized economy, and if you don't know what a decentralized economy is, in the absolute fever dream, it's everybody has their own wallets, so to speak, very similar to how crypto operates to some degree, and they are able to maintain their own assets with their own control rather than having to depend on somebody else to hold it for them. They could deploy it as they choose within a blockchain, within a market. Now, that's a fever dream. I don't know if we're headed there anytime soon, but is that ideal? I don't know. Throw your opinion down there in the comment section. Love to hear what everybody has to say. So with that, let's get to the first two paragraphs coming from this article from our friends at Raw Story, with the headline reading, quote, "Banks scramble to charm MAGA amid fears that they're next on Trump's hit list report." So, quote, "Eric Trump is calling for some banks to go extinct as CEOs scramble to appease the president's administration, according to a Wall Street Journal report. The Trump family's beef with banks started in 2021 when Capital One closed several of its accounts. The Trumps claimed that the closures were because of a disagreement with Trump's politics. Capital One has disputed that assertion," end quote. And for those of you who don't remember, it was very much, it was a fun topic at the time. And what I mean by that is you don't ever want to see, in general, you don't ever want to see a bank closing someone's account for political reasons. Though, because it is Donald Trump, and Capital One is going to get flack for doing something with Trump. He's going to put it on Truth Social. He's going to blast everything on the internet. He's going to get his sons and son-in-law's daughter to go out there and put something out on social media, talk about how he's being attacked. You knew that it was going to come, and or at least I thought it was funny, when Trump basically declared war on Capital One at the time by trying to rally his supporters to not go and use their services. And once again, funny is maybe a particular word that I shouldn't use in this case, but the point being that the knock-on repercussions of this by Capital One should have been at least analyzed a little bit more. Not only in the sense that Trump has thousands, millions of followers who are willing to not give them their business if possible, but also that he could be running again, which in 2021, it looked pretty likely. He declared pretty darn early. It was 2022, I believe, when he officially announced, basically a year and 8 months out, I believe. It was somewhere around there. It was after November of 2021. But my point being that he announced pretty darn early what he was going to do, and maybe a little bit of insider talk, a little bit of insider information with some people that are connected to the Trump movement, the MAGA world influencers who are surrounding him during his time outside of office, could have provided a little bit of insight. Now, does that mean that Trump using his authority as president to shut down Capital One's operations, to strip them of their bank license? I'm not saying he's doing that, but it's one of the many things that he could try to pressure people around him to do, including Jerome Powell. Is that a proper use of power? No, of course not. But we can't preclude this fact, because we know that Donald Trump, this administration specifically, is willing to always test the bounds of what a president can and cannot do. So, with that said, let's jump to another quote from the article. Quote, "Multiple Wall Street Journal sources claim several banks, including but not limited to JP Morgan, Chase, Citigroup, and Capital One, have met with GOP state leaders to rectify any alleged issues." A spokesperson for JP Morgan said, quote, "We believe understanding policymakers' perspectives while sharing our own makes us a better bank." Bank of America said it serves clients in the oil and gas industry as well as those working in clean energy and renewable energy, end quote. And this is the leverage that they have and that they will continue to have, which is a lot of different corporations are propped up and I say propped up not to imply that they would fall without it, but they actively use the services of these banks in order to get different business loans so that they can have speculative, in this case, speculative ventures in order to look for new places to drill or for possible expansions, R&D, all things that actually drive an economy, that push them forward, that provide shareholders with more money, but also possible innovations that can be used across a market, and an intervention to this level, which once again, I think is probably not going to happen, though you cannot preclude it, especially when it's Donald Trump with a personal vengeance. But if he is to shut them down, and he is to actually try to limit their influence, at least, then lots of corporations who currently have loans with any of these, because the ones listed are some of the big five, then you're going, and not all of them are the largest loaners. I do understand that there are specific loan banks out there. I'm not trying to preclude them, but the point overall is that it could have ripple effects across the economy, and Donald Trump is not necessarily a man that wants to see the stock market fall, which is another reason that I would say it is less than likely. Now, is Ross Story possibly playing this up in order to give the sense that the banks are doomed, that Donald Trump is coming after them because of a personal vendetta? More than likely, Ross Story does not like Donald Trump, and to cast a shadow over his administration in any form, including going after big banks that could very well be defrauding the people that actually use them, though I think that's a bit of a stretch. But using this as a story to claim that Donald Trump is simply going after his personal enemies, that is something that I would expect of Ross Story, simply because of their vendetta and hatred of Donald Trump. But let's see who else that these groups are talking to. Quote, Citigroup declined to comment, though the Journal reported Citigroup has met with Texas Governor Greg Abbott to end their stance on selling firearms to people under 21. Additionally, Oklahoma State Treasurer Todd Russ is meeting with JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America in an effort to end their practice of not doing business with oil and gas companies. Quote, I'm not asking them to be mega banks, Russ told the Journal. I want them to manage my portfolio and stay out of these political ideologies. I think they realize that's a fair place to be. End quote. And my next question becomes, if they are willing to kowtow to this administration, and I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, especially if their kowtowing is simply, we're not going to actually get involved in the politics of things, we're not going to moralize our customers, we're not going to tell them that we won't finance these certain ventures because of their politics, but rather because they're too risky, then what happens when the next administration comes in and says, we're going to go after the banks because we want to make sure that they're aligned with the social values of America, blah, 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 blah. What do you think they're going to do again? They're probably going to do the exact same thing. The banks are saving their hind here. They haven't had a come to Jesus moment. They haven't turned around and finally said, we get it now. We get what we did wrong. Maybe they understand to some degree, but their motivation here is not that. Their motivation is not simply for the principles that matter. No, their motivation is making sure that they don't get mollywopped across the top of the head by Donald Trump and his administration. And, that's fair enough when it comes down to protecting your interest. Though, to pretend as though it is anything otherwise, to not be cynical in this case, is to actually provide them a pass in order to get away with it in the future when they swap positions. And maybe there needs to be anti-bias laws on the books. I hate to say it. I don't want to actually impose on businesses whatsoever. I think businesses should actually be able to do these different discriminatory practices. And then companies that want to do these things don't take their business there and they lose out on that market capital. I think that's a fair point of view, though you need something in this case that actually prevents the government from infringing further upon these areas and does not allow the government to try to regulate these banks in the future. And that's what I would be in favor of. But hey, that's enough on that one. If you want to read the entire article, it's linked down there in the description below that like and subscribe button. But for now, let's get to the Daily Delight. It's meant to leave you feeling a little bit positive before you go on for the rest of your day. So this one comes from Dog Time. Headline reads, How to Choose the right dog grooming kit for your pet's breed. And I know a how-to video, Alex, no, but the photos in here, a little bit AI generated, are absolutely fascinating. And also they go through the different breeds and they talk about them. They provide pictures and it's absolutely adorable. So if you want to have a smile on your face, you can also find that article linked in the description below, the like and subscribe button. With all that said, if you want to find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, you can go follow all of the links in the description. Also down there, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at your DailyFlip, where I post links to the videos that come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's this homegrown American podcast, and then on Tuesday and Thursday, we focus on international issues, so stories from around the world. It's called 6 and 6, so 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. So, with that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.